This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to a new edition of Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewalt, Senior Fellow with Susquehanna Valley Center, and I am not joined by Maura Donnelly for this show. I'm joined by Jerry Strickmatter. Jerry is a former House of Representatives member from Lancaster County and is a member of the Susquehanna Valley Center Board. Jerry, welcome back to the show.
Great. Thanks, Charlie. Thanks for being here.
It's nice to have you. Well, today we're inviting another board member and another former board member who's now made quite a splash in Harrisburg and become a state senator. We want to welcome back Scott Wagner. Senator Wagner. Scott.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
Welcome back in a new capacity. We've had you on the show several times in the past talking about different subjects, and one of the subjects that we've talked about in the past that you're making quite a splash in Harrisburg about right now is paycheck protection. One of the problems, as we were talking among the three of us before the filming began today, is that this phrase is perhaps not clearly understood by the general public. Could you tell the general public essentially what is paycheck protection, Senator?
Well, in the outside world, some people know the term as dues checkoff, but it boils down to this, and it's very simple. If you go to Millersville and you get a teaching degree and you come out of Millersville and you start teaching in a school somewhere in South Central PA, you automatically become a member of the union. And there are two levels of dues that would be collected. One would be, we're being told, non-political, and the other dues that would be collected that being told non-optional are political dues. But the bottom line is you become a member of the union, and your dues, whether it's the one due or both dues, are automatically taken out of your paycheck. The school system, your employer, takes that out and then remits that to the union. And the PSEA, which is the Pennsylvania State Education Association, is the largest union in Pennsylvania deducting dues for their members. And the issue that has become very apparent to me, and I knew this before I got to Harrisburg, but it is now crystal clear, that the public sector unions have a tremendous amount of influence and control here in Harrisburg. And that when I say public sector unions, we're talking about the teachers, we're talking about, AFSCME workers over at DPW, the liquor store workers, the local 1776. Then you have the trades unions. You have the IBEW, you have the steel workers, the bricklayers, and they're trades unions. And what a lot of the trades unions do, they have due-paying members, and they would send a bill. A lot of them do this, and some collect their own dues, but most of them send a bill to their member, maybe quarterly, and every quarter the member sends a check in, and he pays the dues for that quarter. And he then becomes essentially a member in good standing. And I don't know all the mechanics, but I pretty well understand how the system would work, that worker who paid the dues, his name is on a list. And so he's listed because he is a member in good standing. So if the IBEW needs 400 electricians and he's a member in good standing, he's going to get called to go out and work on a job. So members in good standing that didn't pay dues or aren't paying dues are not going to get called. So it's real simple. But I think the IBEW offers a tremendous amount of value to their members, and those members, in my world, would be called customers. So they're billing the customers, or they have a system set up that the customer is paying them. With the PSEA, AFSCME, and other unions up here in Harrisburg, it's the automatic dues deduction. So it's not optional. But what's more alarming to me is we're talking about corruption here in Harrisburg, and I think it was an article came out 2 or 3 days ago that Pennsylvania is like the one of the top 5 most corrupt states, and there is a tremendous amount of union influence, and the PSEA sends a magazine out monthly called The Voice, and this was the March issue, and it's like 20 pages, but here it is, Rob McCord on the front, and you open it up, it's all about It's all about, Rob McCord trashing the governor and how the governor, that Tom Corbett's nearly $1.2 billion in corporate tax breaks are bankrupting Pennsylvania. This is false information. This is false, and it's outright lying to their members and anybody that would see this magazine. I went out to my 11 school districts in my 28th district and asked for their state funding over the last 4 years. Most of the schools have gotten between 15 and 25% in additional school funding in the last 4 years. The funding that did disappear was the federal stimulus funding that came in back in, I guess, 08, 09, 9, 10. I mean, it should have never come in to begin with. But we had a president that wanted to make everybody feel good, and we're going to pump a lot of money in, and we're going to hire all these teachers, but he didn't tell everybody it's going to stop in 2 years. But this is the kind of stuff. This is a very gray area to me. If I did this in my office, or I had a newsletter like this out of my office, Scott Wagner for Senate campaign, or the Scott Wagner Senate office, I use elections compliance attorney. There's a good possibility I'd be fighting an ethics situation here. Here is the month of May, and again, it's endorsing Rob McCord, and it talks about the PS. Here's a big article on McCord. Again, here's more about Corbett, and this is.
It turns out they picked the wrong candidate.
Well, they did.
They didn't pick Mr. Wolf.
But and then there's another one. And then you've got the PSEA, PACE, which is the Political Action Committee for Education. And by the way, what I find intriguing is they both come from the same location, 400 North 3rd Street. And then it goes on about, and this to me is intimidation at its best. Going out to retirees and a picture of, Governor Corbett, your pension's a promise, a tax on your pension, what's next? And it goes on, and it's just on and on and on.
So that's what the money is being used for, that you say is being taken from the people rather than having a choice for them to give it voluntarily if they wanted to do that, right? I mean, the paycheck protection is not so much about the content, but about the collection.
Well, I think if you went out and polled teachers, I feel fairly confident that about 50% of the teachers that are paying dues to the PSEA will stop paying dues. And that's a huge threat to the PSEA. They don't want to be members. And I have a letter from someone that was posted in one of the Pittsburgh papers yesterday, and he left the union because of all the political propaganda that the PSEA was promoting. And he talked about one morning before school started, they had a rally to support electing Barack Obama for re-election. This is wrong. We need to take the politics out of this, and we need to get down to the facts. But for the listeners out there, and trust me when I tell you this, pension reform is needed and critical, and we have to do it. This is stopping paycheck protection is stopping any type of pension reform, because you have the PSEA out lobbying saying, they're going to take your pension away. And there's a lot of facts that aren't true. This is intimidation at its best. And then we want to talk about school taxes. Well, we have to correct the pension problem before we correct the school tax problem. I mean, they're all intertwined.
Well, give us a snapshot. Where are we at this point as we approach the budget completion for this particular year? Where are we on school property tax and its consideration? You've taken a leading role since your historic election on this issue. How is it unfolding?
I'm going to give you the honest answer. We are nowhere on the property tax issue, because we have to take care of this issue first, because we have the unions running around. They're reminding members, we supported you, and members, it's in the House and Senate that the unions were, they were there when I needed me, or when I needed them, and we're nowhere. And it's the same way with the pension. The hybrid pension proposal that's out there, I come from the private sector. We're used to 401ks. I mean, come on, we got to take the medicine now. And I think, but I will tell you what I see in liquor store privatization. And another thing is, I heard on the street last night, and I don't have a problem mentioning the name, a firm here in town, Long Nyquist, has been retained by the PSEA to beat on us over at the Hill. And the Long and Nyquist has been hired in the past and is being hired by Wendell Young at the 1776 to beat on us over on the Hill.
The firm you're talking about are lobbyists.
They're lobbyists.
Okay.
And, you know, they're, but I mean, so now you have lots of money, and I'm talking like, I've heard that Wendell's paying Long and Nyquist $20,000 a month, and I hear it's that same amount or more. I mean, $20,000 a month is $250,000 to influence us over on the Hill to not do anything. We have to do something.
But back to this, to do something would it be legislation, you know, that you're looking for on this paycheck protection?
It's real.
And where is that legislation? Is it in a committee?
It's in a committee. It's in committee in the Senate. I think we're getting closer on votes. You know, I'm learning about getting the votes process, and I think we're probably within 4 of having enough votes to get it passed. But the reality is, listen, I want to be real clear. A lot of people are listening, and my message has been misunderstood. I'm not talking about breaking up the unions. The unions can continue doing what they're doing, but the difference is the union should send a bill to their happy customer member, and their happy customer member will pay them. And if the happy customer member sees value in $600 or $800 or $1,000 a year, they'll pay them. And you know, last week up in the Capitol in the Rotunda, it was full of trades unions, and the trades unions were talking about, you know, hiring people and safety and opportunities. I applaud all that, but that's not. This is a totally different issue here with what the PSEA is doing, and the PSEA is the big driver. And unfortunately, you know, all the unions, it's almost like they're all going to stay together in solidarity, and it's because they feel threatened. There's an opportunity for them to change their business model and become more successful. But at the end of the day, you know, it's like, you know, I'm going to hold a gun to your head. You have to pay your dues. I mean, that's.
You know, the argument over the years has been: Are you a professional society, or are you, you know, just following the lead of your representation of the union, you know, you selected? In the House, is there a comparable bill in another committee, or are they waiting for you and the Senate to act first?
Well, as I'm learning, you know, the House is waiting for the Senate's waiting for the House. You know, I would like to see the Senate be the leader on this and come out. We hear that the House has, you know, potentially close to enough votes to get this passed. Obviously, it's a much bigger monster over there. You have 203 votes. You know, in the Senate, we have 50 votes that we're working with. So, but this is, again.
And only 2 to 3 weeks. So.
In 2 to 3 weeks. But I just have to be crystal clear to the people. In the next 1 to 2 weeks, everybody is going to get their school tax bill. And you know what? Everywhere in most of my districts, with the exception of 1 or 2 in my Senate district, they're all raising taxes. And so people aren't going to be happy. And here we go again. But it's don't, you know, I've been getting some criticism. You know, why did I hitch my wagon to the paycheck protection? Why am I not focused on school tax and some of these other issues? Folks, it's the paycheck protection is the horse pulling this cart with all the problems on, and we have to take care of the horse first. We can't take care of the cart first. So, I mean, that's just super, super important. But at the end of the day,
well, thanks for bringing that to our attention, because it is timely.
There's a great book out there. It's real thin, and in fact, I purchased 50 and gave the books out to my Senate colleagues. It's called "Who Moved My Cheese?" And you know what? The unions are having their cheese moved, and you know what? Every now and then, especially in the private sector, if you reinvent yourself and you move your cheese around, eat some different cheese, who knows? You might end up with a better cheese factory.
And so, you heard it here. Oprah's not the only one that has a reading club. Senator Wagner has some ideas as well. And so we leave you on that note. We want to thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing what comes of this particular year's budget. We'll be back with a second segment right after this.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The Council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions to make the Commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Express, transporting construction, farm, and industrial equipment throughout the United States, and by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by Penn Waste, your best local choice for your waste removal and recycling needs.
Hi, welcome back to the second segment of Behind the Headlines. In this segment, Jerry and I are lucky enough to welcome back Dave Sanko to the show. Dave, of course, is the Executive Director of the Township Supervisors of Pennsylvania, and we're happy to have you back, Dave. Thank you. We find that we're approaching budget time, and we've talked about the budget before with you, but now it's really at crunch time, and the budget deadline is coming up, and it looks like we have a gaping hole in the budget of anywhere from $1 to $1.3 billion. What does that mean for the municipalities? There's some talk of different ways to generate extra revenue. One of them might be the imposition of a severance tax on top of the impact fee that's already charged on natural gas drillers. What would that mean to local municipalities and Pennsylvanians?
Well, one of the interesting things about the Act 13 as it was passed, and one of the wisdoms of an impact fee, was that money would go back to local communities, and that there was language in Act 13 that if there would ever be a severance tax in the future, that the triggering of a severance tax would invalidate the local impact fees. So the language in Act 13 will require that local impact fees will go away as a result of the implementation of a severance tax.
I don't think many people in the Commonwealth realize that, Dave.
I suspect that may be true, but unfortunately, and that at the end of the day spells bad news for local communities and local governments, because there are local impacts that are being caused by the natural gas exploration and that economic development opportunity. But those local impacts, if the impact fees go away, will result in local property tax increases. Now that may be good news for Harrisburg in having more money to spend, but bad news for local property taxpayers. One of the other things that I think that was in there, again, local impact fees were specifically prohibited from being passed along to leaseholders or those who would be paying or getting royalty payments. So average Pennsylvanians who are earning revenues from their leases. They're not allowable as post-production costs. A severance tax, however, is allowable as a post-production cost. So a severance tax is going to be passed along to Pennsylvanians. So for those who think that this is somehow a punishment or penalty for the industry to pay, more often than not, those costs are going to be passed along to Pennsylvanians in the form of reduced royalty payments.
With that being said, is the township working in these final weeks before a budget is enacted and this is being considered again to come up with another alternative, like we do with roads, for instance? When there's needed impact fee increases, to make our roads safer, which your group and the governor, everybody working in the legislature, be commended for addressing that. We now have a safer highway system and will in the future. Is there a way that it could be structured that way as well with the severance tax, on the drilling? Well,
we're working hard with members of the legislature and the administration to try and ensure that the local impact fees are preserved, and that those costs are being paid by the industry, not by Pennsylvanians, and that there have been invaluable projects that have been able to be funded with local impact fees, from fire and emergency services to police departments to parks. And one of the most important categories was a capital reserve fund that allowed you to save money away for a rainy day when you could save up enough to do the bigger projects. And I know that's contrary to traditional spending philosophy in Harrisburg, where you're going to spend everything as soon as you get it. But local governments are being a little more reserved and a little more judicious about planning for the future in some larger expenditures and putting money away into a capital reserve fund.
Dave, one of the issues that continues to bedevil the budget, of course, is pension reform. In fact, the governor has made announcements that he will refuse to sign a budget unless it includes pension reform. We'll just, I guess, have to wait and see if that's true. But what are the latest developments in pension reform, and what does pension reform mean for townships, for municipalities? Is it advantageous, disadvantageous? What effect will it have on your townships?
Well, I think pension reform as a whole will be advantageous for all Pennsylvanians. I don't know if there's a particular impact on local government, except to the extent that they may have a local pension fund for their employees. As you look at the large unfunded liabilities, most of them are with state employees and with teachers. And that local governments, all of Pennsylvania local governments, only represent about $8 billion versus the almost $50 billion in state and teachers funds. When you separate out Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, that number drops to only about $1 billion, which is still a lot of money. No matter where you come from. But there are some real, I think it's important for the legislature to address some of the root causes, and those are arbitration awards that don't require communities' ability to pay, and some of the rules that govern collective bargaining. And until you fix those things, you're not going to fix pension reform.
What's your crystal ball say, since you were acting governor or assistant governor, in the past, you've seen things all different directions, and having a view from across the state through your association with all the townships, what do you think is going to be happening in the next 2 to 3 weeks?
Well, a long time ago, I was chief of staff for Governor Schweiker, and I think the next couple weeks are going to be look an awful lot like many Junes, fraught with challenges. There is a large appetite to fund projects and to fund programs and critical parts of government, and there are reduced funds available. And there's a lot of different reasons for the reduced funds available, and I think as we move forward, we'll probably see hopefully some reductions and some common sense approaches to spending that will hopefully try and close that budget gap. I know there are some ways to reduce out year expenses, and I know that broad-based tax increases are off the table.
Well, the State House, Dave, recently passed House Bill 1773 that would make comprehensive changes to the Municipal's Financial Recovery Act. While there's some positive steps in this bill, we find that the townships and other local government associations have opposed this legislation. Why is that?
Well, that really deals with Act 47 reforms, which are the Distressed Municipalities Act. That was in place for over 20 years. Moving forward, we think it's more important to address some of the root causes that put communities into financial distress, rather than trying. That particular bill sets some arbitrary deadlines. We all think it's important for communities to get out of Act 47 and to get back onto a solid fiscal setting. But one of the more egregious parts of the discussion of that bill is that there would be a disincorporation of a community. That some arbitrary bureaucrat in Harrisburg would just say that community X is gone, without the consultation or input of the local governing body or even the local residents, and that community would become a ward of the state, if you will, and their taxes would be replaced by property assessments. It's just, there are good parts of the bill that allow for communities to be involved in early intervention, to try and figure out some of the root causes to distress, and being able to fix those. But until we can get rid of the disincorporation components, we think those decisions are best made in local communities and not made by nameless and faceless bureaucrats in Harrisburg.
And with that, I think everybody believes that, closer to the people, the better off we are. I think, the system's set pretty well, that the local governments do well what they're supposed to do, and the state is supposed to do what they're doing, and the federal government now it's gotten out of whack with the federal government wanting to impose themselves on everything. Do you have other, to be positive, because we talked about a lot of negative things here, but to be positive, I know the townships and the state have worked together before, like with highways and making them safer, with this agility projects where, using township resources along with the state resources to make the roads and the intersections safer. Are there other things that people, across the Commonwealth can see coming down the pike where the townships and the state will be working on other areas to try to reduce spending or make smarter spending of needed services that you've suggested that maybe we'll see come out?
I think a lot of what townships are responsible for at the end of the day revolve around transportation and public safety. So you'll see, and transportation and public safety blend together so nicely, and there are so many synergies that come from that already that you'll see that continue to grow. But you'll also see, I think, through the course of some of the activities with safety after September 11 of 2001, and the regional terrorism task forces and communities banding together and addressing consolidated purchasing and planning on a regional basis. Those have all been positive steps from a safety perspective. We continue to advocate cooperation between local governments and trying to break down the barriers and walls and to do projects together. 83% of our communities do participate in cooperative ventures with other local governments or with the state government. And those are all geared to the bottom line of helping to ensure that quality services are delivered at an affordable price and keeping an eye on controlling taxes.
If I could just follow up on that, one area that sort of tell us where we are with the state police and with the townships and with safety, with townships paying for a police force or not.
Sure.
If we don't, then there's always this talk that especially like third-class cities, they have the police forces and they take care of the safety, and a lot of times the townships
Sure.
that have more resources have chosen to use have state police come in. Is there a policy of the association of looking at to say, well, it would make more sense to not rely on the state police funding and try to use those highway funds in a different way?
45 seconds left to answer.
Well, I think at the end of the day, as we look at Pennsylvania has the oldest state police in the country. Everybody in Pennsylvania gets state police coverage. There are some communities that choose to have more police coverage, more police needs for public safety. Those often wind up becoming the cities or larger communities. They come with extraordinary costs. We advocate and support communities being able to enter into agreements with the state police to purchase those services on a community-by-community basis.
Okay. Dave, we want to thank you very much for coming and bringing us up to date on what's going on with the budget in regard to how it affects local government. So we're going to continue to follow this, and we hope you will follow us and be with us again next week on Behind the Headlines. You can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, and The Voice of PA. Also on The Voice of PA, you can see John Patterson has returned to the Song Parlor, and the door is open again. We hope you'll join us, and we hope you'll join us again next week. See you then.